Hello, welcome to BBC News. The Ukrainian government says recapturing the city of Kherson means victory in the war against Russia is only a matter of time. Ukraine regained control of its southern city after officials in Moscow said 30,000 Russian troops were pulled out of the area yesterday. Those sources close to President Zelensky have warned that the Kremlin's forces are making new fortifications on the left bank of the Dnipro River. And there's also concern after satellite images show significant new damage to a major dam in the area. Our correspondent, Catherine Bieruhunga, sent this report from the capital, Kyiv.
This is the vital Kakhovka Dam, 36 miles north of Kherson. It's one of Ukraine's biggest hydroelectric power plants. Under the cover of darkness, a massive explosion is unleashed. If the dam collapses, it could cause massive flooding and quickly swamp over 80 settlements, including Kherson. Images from Friday morning show sections of the dam were destroyed. The BBC could not verify the extent of the damage or who caused it. Over in Kherson city, there have been emotional celebrations after Ukrainian forces arrived. People here have lived under Russian occupation for more than 8 months. Many are still without power, water, or the internet. However, retreating Russian forces still pose a threat from across the Dnipro River.
We have been warned yesterday by our general staff of the Ukrainian armed forces that Russians are making new fortifications on the left bank side of the Dnieper River, and there is a likelihood of massive artillery shelling.
Speaking at a Southeast Asia summit in Cambodia this morning, Ukraine's foreign minister warned that other countries could follow in Russia's footsteps if action is not taken.
Violation of borders, use of force, committing mass atrocities against civilian population. If anyone in the world sees that Russia can get away easily with all of this, then this someone will be tempted to follow the suit.
Winning Kherson has been a big boost for the national morale, but a complete victory over Russia remains elusive. Catherine Bieruhunga, BBC News, Kyiv.
Well, our international editor Jeremy Bowen is on the road to Kherson and sent us this update.
The Ukrainians have got a lot to celebrate because they've scored a major victory over the Russians much more quickly and smoothly than they expected. And while the Russians have left behind them a great deal of damage, for now the Ukrainians aren't focusing on that because they believe they've taken a giant step forward to victory. Now, they will have to deal with a changed strategic situation because by withdrawing across the river, the Russians have stabilized this section of the front, and they say they've taken more than 30,000 troops out with them. Those are troops who could have been killed fighting to stay in Kherson, who now can be deployed elsewhere. So that is why Ukraine will continue to push NATO for more and better weapons for the battles they face in the forthcoming winter months.
Jeremy Bowen in Ukraine. The BBC has calculated that the number of people who've crossed the Channel in small boats this year has now surpassed 40,000, the biggest number since records began in 2018. Just over 28,000 people made the same journey last year. Our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford is with me. So that figure, Daniel, is a milestone of sorts.
Yeah, another very difficult milestone for ministers. When the small boats crossing started in 2018, the number in the first year was less than 300. But if you look at this graphic, you can see that each year it's gone up and up again and up again. And as you say, last year it reached 28,500. Well, by last night, we were just with less than 100 short of 40,000, and talking to witnesses and to rescuers today, it's clear that more than 100 have crossed since midnight last night. So that red line has gone over 40,000. And of course, we're only in mid-November, and last year around 8,000 crossed in the last 2 months of the year. So it's likely that the figure by the end of the year is going to be closer to 50,000 than 40,000 if the weather stays good.
Yes, and people will think, why is it so difficult to tackle this?
Yeah, it's very, very awkward for ministers, not least of all because it makes them look as if they're not in control of the southern coast of the United Kingdom, but also because of the risk of people dying. It was only in November last year that 27 people died in a single night when boats got into trouble on the Channel. And yes, there's more talks going on with the French to try and increase patrols on the beaches, maybe put some British officers into the French control rooms, but that's not going to make a massive amount of difference to the people crossing in the short term. And yes, while the weather's been bad for the last couple of weeks, ministers have managed to reduce the number of people being held in the Manston Processing Centre, but as the weather's gone good again, those numbers are going to start to rise again, and they've only managed to get those numbers down by putting people out into hotels. And of course people are very concerned about the millions of pounds being spent every day on keeping migrants in hotels.
Daniel Sanford, thank you. We'll just take a look at a few other stories here this afternoon. In the US, following Tuesday's midterm elections, the Democrats have inched closer to keeping control of the Senate with a projected win in Arizona. It's believed Mark Kelly has beaten the Republican candidate Blake Masters, which would mean President Biden's party needs one more seat to have a majority. Votes are still being counted in the state of Nevada, and Georgia is expected to hold a runoff election next month. A cruise ship hit by COVID-19 has docked in Sydney in Australia. About 800 passengers on board the Majestic Princess, which had sailed from New Zealand, have the virus. Nearly 20% of everyone on board. People who've tested positive are being taken off the ship to complete their isolation in accommodation elsewhere. New Zealand has won the Rugby World Cup after a dramatic victory over England in front of a record crowd for the women's game. The Red Roses led for much of the game in Auckland until New Zealand scored a late try to take the title for a sixth time. Our sports correspondent Joe Curry was watching.
It's an all-black night in Auckland.
Battered and bruised, the unbeatables beaten. For some of these players, the too familiar tears of World Cup heartache. Fans were turning up to see the world number ones England, unbeaten in over 30 games, face a team who broke their hearts 5 years ago.
We landed yesterday and the final is today and we fly home tomorrow.
Being held on the other side of the world means not many England fans have been able to make the trip across. It could feel like they're not just taking on 15 players on the pitch, but an entire stadium.
And a daunting one at that. Not that it stopped them raising their voices. The volume and intimidation then upped by their opposition. If England had nerves, they didn't show. A dream start, which continued as England quickly built up a healthy lead before a moment which would change the game.
Oh my goodness.
Lydia Thompson's reckless tackle, and she was shown a red card. The Black Ferns made use of their extra player almost immediately, but England regathered and dotted down twice. There was a change of ends, but no change of pace. New Zealand were straight out of the blocks to hit England twice. England looked to their driving maul, and once again it proved unstoppable. Amy Cockayne with a hat-trick of tries as the lead changed hands once again. But the Black Ferns still had magic up their sleeve. A perfect kick and some quick thinking as they set up a nail-biting finish. England desperately tried to find a spark that would keep their World Cup hopes alive, but as the final whistle went, those hopes were over.
It's really tough, you know, it hurts. We've spoken in the past about how sport's pretty cruel and it doesn't always go the way you want, and it's won on lost and fine margins, and that's certainly what happened this evening.
England came to New Zealand as heavy favourites and looking for redemption, but they leave with only questions about how this trophy got away from them once again. Joe Curry, BBC News, Auckland.
Well, there is more throughout the evening on the BBC News channel. I'll be back with the late news here at 10:40. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news wherever you are. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.